Welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli the Computer Guy here for the Daily Blob, where we say, don't you remember a time period where you used to throw technology in the trash? Remember when you would get your new Sega Genesis and the Atari 2600 would go out in the trash bag to be taken to the landfill or wherever the hell it went, and nobody thought any more about it? I think it's kind of interesting, kind of being an old timer. I still play video games. I am currently playing Assassin's Creed. I always play as the girl because that's the only thing that makes sense to me. But anyways, I still play my video games. And what's kind of curious is, the young people nowadays, or a lot of people nowadays, have this idea that this media is literally going to last forever, right? When I was born, when I was really young, we had 8-track tapes. Literally had 8-track tapes. No idea what the hell happened to 8-track tapes. Because they were 8-track tapes. They were garbage. Then we had record players. And then most of those are the record players and the records disappear. Then we had tapes. Oh, I've heard the Gen Zers are getting nostalgic for tapes. I have no idea what the fuck is wrong with them. Like if you say you're nostalgic for a record, for vinyl, there is something to be said about vinyl. There is nothing to be said about a tape. It was the best of what we had at the time period. It was still pretty crappy back then. Oh my God, I found my old tapes. I found my old tapes from when I was a teenager a while ago. And I was like, ooh, yeah, let me listen to this stuff. I literally put it into a tape player and the quality of the sound was so bad. Oh, it was horrible. Anyway, so they went, wait for it, into the trash. CDs went in the trash. DVDs went in the trash. Technology comes. And it used to be technology left, and nobody really thought a whole hell of a lot about it. But we're in the modern world, and people think about a lot of stuff nowadays because they have time to. And so one of the big things that's come up is this whole idea of the preservation of media, right? That this should be preserved for the future. And the interesting thing to think about with a lot of the ways that we get our media today is it's just not a system that's designed to be very easy to be saved in perpetuity forever, right? When I was when I was renovating my building back when I had my computer company years ago, right? It was a very old, it was a 150-year-old building, and it really not a lot had been done with it for the past 50 years, right? So anyways, when I went in there to renovate it, I could find there was actually newspapers from the 1940s and 50s in there, and that's the thing about the newspaper format is you print the newspaper, and then as long as you don't throw it in the garbage, it still exists until you do throw it into the garbage, right? Well, the thing is with CNN.com or BBC.com or, any of these sites nowadays, Bloomberg, right? They put it up, they put their content online, but as soon as they shut their servers down or as soon as something happens to that content, it goes away, and it is not easy to preserve. So one of the things that this is coming up with is video games. So a lot of video games nowadays, basically they have a lot of online components. The online components are mandatory for those games to function, and a lot of people are getting pissed off because they bought those games, and they feel like they should be able to run them forever, but the systems are not designed that way. So we have this EU thing going on right now for stop killing games. Stop killing our games, which is kind of interesting. It is philosophical. What is Eli's opinion? It is philosophically interesting. It is philosophically interesting and practically stupid. But anyways, we'll talk about it today because it is philosophically interesting and practically stupid. So they have this petition going on. They now have 1.2 million European citizens, supposedly, that has signed this petition with the idea to stop the death of games. Quote, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality, this is interesting, legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. An increasing number of video games are sold effectively as goods with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. The practice is a form of planned obsolescence and is not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is is largely untested in many countries, right? So you go out there, you buy the next Star Wars game or the next Assassin's Creed game or whatever else. It has an online component to it. The online component shuts down. All of a sudden, you can no longer play your game. It's broken. One of the curious things that they bring up here is basically the idea of transparency. So when you buy this game, when you buy this thing, they don't tell you that there's an expiration date or a potential expiration date. They don't say, we will support this for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, or whatever else, and then after that point in time, it may no longer be functional. I actually think more transparency would be a good idea, that when you buy these products, they give you a minimum time that it will be maintained, right? So you think about a lot of these companies when they're creating these games, right? They have a large amount of investment. So you just set aside an amount of investment, almost escrow an amount of investment for the infrastructure, right? Essentially, escrow is where you put money away to be spent for a specific thing. So you can say, look, we can keep these servers up and running for 1 year, 2 years. We guarantee when you buy this product, you will be able to use it for at least X amount of time. If you're able to use it for longer than that, great, but we only guarantee that you will be able to use it for this amount of time. It is interesting with this kind of thing because I think most of these games, when they start complaining about it, a lot of them have been around for a long time, right? They've been around for a decade, right? In my generation, when I was in high school, right? So when I was a kid, we went from Atari 2600 and Nintendo to Sega Genesis within like 10 years. May have been less than 10 years, right? So this stuff was getting thrown out all the time, right? By the time you get to Sega Genesis, you're not playing Atari 2600 games anymore. You don't care about that piece of crap. It goes in the trash. One of the interesting things now, again, with all this online stuff, is that things can theoretically last a lot longer. And so it is kind of curious here is, how long should a game last for? If you bought it in 2010, should you expect it to be playable in 2015, or should it not be? Anyways, over the past year, we have successfully escalated complaints on this problem to consumer agencies in France, Germany, and Australia, and have brought forth petitions for a new law on this problem to various countries. A list of the actions to date can be viewed here. As of 2025, most consumer action on this matter has concluded, and we are awaiting decisions on it from several governments. However, there are a few remaining avenues left where people can participate if they're eligible. If you go over and take a look at their facts page, question, how are publishers destroying video games? An increasing number of video games are designed to rely on a server the publisher controls in order for the game to function. This acts as a lifeline to the game. When the publisher decides to turn this off, it is essentially cutting off life support to the game, making it completely inoperable for all customers. How is this campaign going to save video games? If companies face penalties for destroying copies of games they have sold, this is very likely to start curbing the behavior. Though I wonder if it is. That's where I think this is just word choice. I think this whole save video games basically gets destroyed with word choice, right? If they simply labeled the packaging as X, Y, or Z, I don't think they would lose any sales. I honestly don't believe they would lose any sales. And then all this goes the hell away, right? If you pay $70 for Assassin's Creed and you are told that it will be maintained for at least 3 years, I'd pay $70 for Assassin's Creed. I think most people would, right? If you hear these video games, right, and you're told a minimum amount of time that you're buying it with an expected lifetime of X, I think most people would honestly be fine with that. This is kind of the interesting thing, I think, with the video game industry and some other industries where they're opaque even when they don't necessarily need to be, because I don't think most people honestly would care. So anyways, face penalties for destroying copies of games they have sold. This is very likely to start curbing the behavior. I would disagree. If a company is forced to allow customers to retain their games in even one country, implementing those fixes worldwide becomes a trivial issue for them. So if destroying the game you paid for became illegal in France, companies that patch the game would likely apply the same patch to the games worldwide. An analogy to this process is how the ACC in Australia forced Valve to offer refunds on Steam Steam, so Valve ended up offering them to people worldwide as a result. Aren't you asking companies to support games forever? Isn't that unrealistic? Question. Answer, no, we are not asking that at all. We are in favor of publishers ending support for a game whenever they choose. What we are asking for is that they implement an end-of-life plan to modify or patch the game so that it can run on customer systems with no further support from the company being necessary. I do wonder about that with a lot of these video games nowadays. When they connect to servers, there's a lot of stuff that's actually going on when they connect to the server. And I do wonder how realistic it would be to localize a lot of those services, right? Think about it like with these AI things, right? So with artificial intelligence, especially as more and more AI is going to be put into computer games, whether you want them or not, right? AI requires a lot of resources. Again, I have a M2 Max MacBook Pro, and you can run stuff using the old Llama AI framework pretty well, up to the 7 billion parameter models. But trying to run 14 billion parameter models really starts to suck, and you can't go any bigger than that. One of the interesting questions here is, even if they came up with a localized version for these services, how many people's systems could actually run that? And then the other question with this too is, how do they support that with new operating systems? So when Windows comes out with a new operating system, when Windows comes out with new patches, when Apple comes out with new patches, that type of thing, if you say you have to be able to continue playing the games, what happens to ongoing support at that point? I don't know. Let's see here. We agree that it's unrealistic to expect companies to support games indefinitely and do not advocate for that in any way. Additionally, there are already real-world examples of publishers ending support for online-only games in a responsible way. Aren't games licensed, not sold to customers? The short answer is this is a large legal gray area depending on the country. In the United States, this is generally the case. In other countries, the law is not clear at all since license agreements cannot override national laws. Those laws often consider video games as goods, which have many consumer protections that apply to them. So despite what the license agreement may say, in some countries you are indeed sold your copy of a game license. Some terms still apply, however. For example, you are typically only sold your individual copy of the game license for personal use, not the intellectual property rights of the video game itself. Isn't it unreasonable to ask this for free-to-play games? While free-to-play games are free to the users to try, they are supported by microtransactions, which customers spend money for, blase, 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 and they have a whole bunch of different facts here. So, yeah. I think word choice. I think word choice would probably destroy all of this in about a heartbeat. Do I think the video game manufacturers should be more transparent about how their businesses operate? Yes. Do I think it is realistic for a lot of these video games to basically be able to localize the installations so that they will not need the game servers? I highly question that. And as I've said, I think as soon as you change the licensing agreement, basically as you make things more transparent, then basically all of the other arguments go away. This whole idea that games need to be saved essentially for posterity is an interesting question. I think it's something that we do have to think about in this internet age. But the other thing to be thinking about in this internet age is just how much content gets created, right? If a site shuts down, if something shuts down, there is just so much content out there. What is a practical resource for trying to save any of this going into the future? I think there's some interesting questions here, but I think this will probably fail. Fail with word choice. Fail with word choice. So what do you think about this whole idea of stop killing games being pushed in Europe? The idea that even if the game servers go down, you should be able to continue be able to play the video games. Do you think that this is a practical thing that can even be done? And do you think if they just change the wording a little bit on whatever it is you sign when you buy the product, that would just simply eliminate what they're petitioning for anyway? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. Remember, whether it's a thumb up, a thumb down, an awesome comment, or a horrible comment, in the modern world of social media, it is all an interaction, and that is all that's important. So put something down below, and with that, I'll see y'all later.